You don't got Hayes noodles in the O-Dog. This is Overdrive, though, on TSN 4 and TSN 1050. My name is Brendan Dunlop. Happy to be filling in and happy to be alongside Dave Feschuk. We spent the first hour talking a lot of soccer. Mm-hmm. We'll spend the next bit talking baseball. We'll get to some basketball with Leo Routens. It is Home Run Derby Monday. A couple of friends were bugging me. They knew I was doing this show today on this day specifically. Said, what are the odds that you say Derby at some point?
Oh, because you're a soccer guy.
Which is another soccer term. Does that drive you nuts too? Because it's spelled Derby, but it's pronounced Derby.
I know.
It's just how it's English twang.
It's pronounced Derby in England. Yeah. This ain't England.
Yeah. The Kentucky Derby. What a horse.
Yeah, exactly. No way.
This ain't England. Yeah, exactly.
Totally. No, it's hilarious how that works, right? But no, it's I love the Derby. Or the Derby, whichever one.
Sorry, did I just
baseball Derby?
I just fed it to you.
I do love the Home Run Derby. It's I'm looking forward to it tonight. I got to say, and I also like the fact that there's always this debate about is this going to ruin somebody's swing? We've seen some guys who've had great home run derbies and then have bad second halves. If you're a Blue Jays fan, you got to like the numbers. The last time Vladdy Jr. was in the Derby, he had a really good second half. It kind of ignited him. And considering he's been good but not great to this point in the season, maybe the Derby is exactly what he needs to kind of drive him into the second half, which you have to believe is going to be better for the Blue Jays because it just hasn't gone the way they wanted it to go to this point.
Yeah, no, great point. One of the things I wanted to get to with our next guest, joining us on the Maple Toyota Hotline is TSN MLB analyst Steve Phillips. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you guys. Yeah. How's everything?
Great to be with you too. It's good. We're excited for the Home Run Derby, as you heard. But how about yourself? This break comes around. It's not much of a break for you in the media. You're always on TV. You're always on the radio. You don't get to enjoy a bit of a break in the middle of July, or am I wrong? Or do you?
No, I don't. But I don't need a break. I mean, I love it. I mean, this beats working for a living. Yeah. I mean, it really does. I just, I love it. And so, there's no part of me that looks at it as a job. It's funny. I used to talk to Joe Buck when he would come into with the Cardinals and broadcast when I was with the Mets, and I go, "Are you working tonight?" And he'd go, "Nope, but I'm broadcasting a game." Because it didn't feel like work. It's just, it's like, to get paid to watch baseball games and talk about them, it really is a gift. And so, so today's a twist with the Home Run Derby. I broadcast the Home Run Derbies back in the day at ESPN. I was there at the old Yankee Stadium, the last All-Star game there when Josh Hamilton put on the show.
Amazing.
Absolutely crushed him and put on. I was at the one in Detroit where Bobby Abreu went nuts, but he's one of those guys who really suffered the second half of the season after the Home Run Derby. And so, there's been... I love it. I think, it's funny because at ESPN, it's always been one of the highest rated events every year, highest rated shows that they've done every year. And I do like the format change now too. They put the clock on it, keep it moving. The pace is good. And we're still getting a ton of home runs. And we're seeing the personalities of the players. And so I'm looking forward to it again tonight.
So where are you on the idea that this could be, for Vladdy Jr., Steve, a moment that sort of maybe catapults him into something better than he's been in the first half, when he's been good, but he hasn't been the sort of MVP caliber of Vladdy Jr. that Blue Jay fans obviously hope he can be at some point. Do you like the idea that maybe since the last time he was in it, he had a great second half? Do you believe that could actually be a factor here?
Yeah, I do. He's on pace for 25 home runs. Part of it's because he didn't hit many at home early in the season. But, he hit 32 last year, but he's only a couple years removed from hitting 48. And what's interesting is his launch angle is higher. His average launch angle is higher this year than it was during the season in which he hit 48. He's barreling the ball more than he did those years. But, it's just the timing of how he's doing it and when he's putting the ball in play. And so I think he's ready for a breakout. I do. I think getting him to hunt the bottom of the baseball in the Home Run Derby is a really good thing for him. Because, when you take 120 swings in a home run derby, or you take 140 swings, 180 swings, if you're around hitting 91 home runs, which means he probably had 180 swings, 200 swings, that motor memory gets locked in. And that's where people worry about it affecting the second half, is that, in a negative way, it could change somebody's swing. But I think for Vladdy, it's the thing that would benefit him the most. And so I think it can help him, and I think it will help him. He's got a tough draw in the bracket on his side of the bracket where, you've got Julio Rodriguez, you've got J-Rod, you've got Betts and Mookie Betts as well. And so it's a tough group on his side of it. Pete Alonso, the other side of the bracket is better. But if he could get to the final, I like the matchup, which is either going to probably be against Randy Arozarena or Luis Robert on the other side. And so I think Vlad Jr.'s got a shot to win this thing.
There you go, Blue Jays fans. If you were worried that the home run derby was going to be bad for Vladdy Jr., Steve Phillips just told you it's going to be good for him. And I'm in the same boat as you. When it comes to this ball club, though, Steve, the Toronto Blue Jays, 9 games above 500 at the All-Star break. They're 7 games out. Tampa's hot, but you wonder how long the Rays are going to keep this up. Is the division within reach for this Blue Jays team? Like, what are the Blue Jays here at the All-Star break?
Yeah, so I think it's going to be tough to win the division. But, we've seen Tampa Bay struggle. They lost 7 of their last 10.
Yeah.
They lost 6 in a row or 7 in a row before they won on Sunday. Baltimore's played out of their minds and not had a losing streak yet. They've sort of been very consistent.
Crazy.
The Jays have been up and down, but they're, 5 games behind the Orioles, 7 games behind the Rays. So the division, it's not impossible. I don't think it's likely. I think they're likely going to be a wild card team. But, we've seen obviously the Phillies last year is the 3rd wild card, made a run to the World Series, so it can certainly happen. But I think it won't just be the Jays playing better. It would take the Rays and Orioles and Yankees sort of all falling back to the pack, I think. And I think that's a little difficult to expect.
So, Steve, I got to get your take on Alek Manoah. I think, there were a lot of people who were critical of the Blue Jays, kind of the way they rolled out Manoah after the terrible, debacle of his start in the Florida Complex League to a, more respectable start in Double-A. He was immediately launched into a Major League game Friday night against the Tigers, and he pitched really well, defying maybe some of those expectations that this wasn't the greatest of plans. What did you think going in, and sort of what do you think differently or the same, having seen it?
Yeah, so I was not a fan of the quick return. Sample size matters, and I understand that you weren't going to have him spend the half a year down there to get fixed. But, when somebody has been bad for a period of time, they've got a lot of bad thoughts. They've got a lot of bad memories that they need to clear. And one start doesn't tend to do that. And so my experience is that you need to repeat and ingrain the motor memory of the more positive changes that you're making. And it's not about locking in just when he's throwing the ball well. It's when he's not throwing it well, when he is getting hit around, when he doesn't have his best stuff. Then what does he do? Does he abandon those things that he learned? Does he abandon his new mechanics? Does he emotionally get out of control? Though that's the time that you have to prepare for. And I don't think one start fixes that. So personally, I would have had him start in the minor leagues Friday. I would have had him start in the minor leagues on Wednesday. I don't care what level. I'd have him pitch in the minor leagues. And then I would slot him in on the back end. I would have given him 3 minor league starts to let things lock in a bit, then start him out of the break coming back in. And so, and the thing is, people say, well, I guess it wasn't wrong. And I don't know that the end justifies the means necessarily, because it is about, when he struggles, what will it look like? And so I don't know that we have an answer yet that he's fixed. I think we know that he threw 5 quality innings against a bad offensive team. His mistakes didn't get hit. He did make some mistakes. He was a little out of whack mechanically early, but he filled up the strike zone, so it was progress. He did some of those things. His mental approach was right, which was attack hitters, throw strikes. His emotional control in the first inning was not great. It affected his mechanics, which weren't great, but he settled in a little bit, and mechanics settled in a little bit. But, I think when you face a better team and he hangs the slider in the first inning and they deposit it over the left field wall, then what? And that's what I wanted to be prepared for, to be able to handle that emotionally so that he doesn't change his mechanics and he doesn't change his mental approach.
We're talking with TSN MLB analyst Steve Phillips. Do you think, Steve, that the Blue Jays overthought this process with how to handle him? Because listening to you, and I had the same thoughts, I feel as though the Jays feared if they put him in Buffalo and he gets torched, we're going to lose him. So let's put him down to a place where he can be comfortable, where there's no pressure. But the reality is he's facing hitters that are nowhere near his class. And he hasn't had a gap probably like that since he was a kid.
So I was okay with the complex league because it got him out of media view. It sent him down there. There's no coverage of those games. There's not writers interviewing the kids after those games. And you can go down there, you can work on things. You can do video work that you can't do necessarily other places. And so I was okay with it. But when he got knocked around there, I didn't quite understand the move to AA. And even with the move to AA, I'm okay. With doing that, but you got to remember, he hit rock bottom in the big leagues. And I didn't know there was a further bottom, but there was. When he got torched by 18 and 19-year-olds, he had to hit a further rock bottom. And so, the hole was deeper to dig out of. And I didn't think the one start allowed him to come all the way back out of that thing. So we'll see. It was against a bad team, which was setting him up to succeed. They also need to figure out what he is or what he isn't with the trade deadline approaching. And so I think they may have felt some pressure to get an answer if he's going to be better or not, because it might dictate how aggressive they are at the trade deadline. The problem is that makes an acquisition at the trade deadline more important than Manoah. And I think Manoah is the most important player for them. And setting him up to succeed is by far the most important thing. Get whatever pitcher you're going to get. If you get somebody and it's beyond what you needed, then it's icing on the cake. If he's better than what you needed because Manoah's back, so what? That means you got too many really good pitchers. I just don't think that I would have let the trade market dictate Manoah's return to the big leagues.
So, Steve, you talk about the Blue Jays and their playoff hopes. Obviously, always a factor in that is the success or lack thereof of the New York Yankees. And if you're a Blue Jays fan, how much are you heartened by the fact that there's a little bit of turmoil in Yankee land, the most recent of which is the firing of hitting coach Dylan Lawson after the loss Sunday to the Cubs, and they're bringing in Sean Casey. Obviously, we know they haven't been able to hit at all since Judge went down with that toe injury back in June 3rd. What do you make of this? And can the Yankees turn it around, or is this a good sign for Blue Jays fans that they are just grasping at straws?
Well, there's some real vulnerability there for the Yankees. There's no question about that. Without Judge and, Rodon's just back in the rotation. Severino's getting knocked around. That being said, they're a game behind the Blue Jays. They're not going anywhere. They're going to stay in the race. Judge will be back at some point. They're going to get better at the trade deadline. Sean Casey coming in to be the pitching coach he's as upbeat a guy as you're going to find in a lot of, and I changed coaches when I was Mets general manager. And at the time we were 27 and 28. We're sort of floundering. And Bobby Valentine didn't like the idea that I made the move. He said, well, I guess we'll figure out who we are after the next 55 games. And we went 40 and 15.
Genius
40
move.
And 15.
Genius
yeah,
move.
and look, we also changed the pitching coach and we changed the bullpen coach. And my owner said to me that it was a $30 million decision, that it made us more money down the stretch to compete, made us money in the playoffs, and made us money as a playoff team the next season, selling tickets and advertising and sponsorships and all of that. So it can work. And, the fact that it might sting players a little bit that they feel badly, okay, well, they should feel badly because it's not all on the hitting coach, but they're an older team. I mean, Donaldson's on the back end of it. LeMahieu's on the back end of it. Mm-hmm. Stanton's getting up there a little bit in age. And so, they're not being very productive right now. I don't know how much, Sean Casey's going to fix Josh Donaldson. It might just be that sometimes the slap in the face or the punch in the gut that leads to somebody getting fired wakes everybody up and gets them going. But I think the Yankees are who they are. And until Judge comes back, they're not going to be that juggernaut.
Adjusted for inflation and with the money thrown around in baseball now, how much do you think your $30 million move there would be in today's game?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Look, for an owner now who spent $377 million, I mean, that's the other thing. You got an owner who spent $377 million. So $30 million, though, to Steve Cohen. I did the math on this. I can tell you what $40 million is worth. So Steve Cohen, when they released Robbie Cano, the Mets, they had $40 million left. And at the time, I thought he was worth $14 billion. $40 million to somebody with $14 billion is the same as $287.14 to somebody with $100,000.
Wow. Exactly.
It's a spit in the ocean. It is nothing. So yeah, I might make, it might have been a $30 million decision, but Steve Cohen would be like, okay, great. You know what? I looked into my couches and the cushions and I found $30 million there.
Right.
So not that big a deal.
Exactly. So Steve, when you are the GM, and, a wiseacre manager like Bobby Valentine gives you the side eye and publicly, I don't know, publicly or privately says he's not a big believer in you shaking things up. How does that go down, A? And do you come back at him when, your move turns out to be a stroke of genius and you go 40 and 15 down the stretch?
So you're asking me if I'm a told you so kind of guy.
Right.
Is really what you're asking me right there. So Bobby was really unhappy. And it really compromised our relationship. And the reason I did not go to him about this was that in some part, he was some part of the problem in that I made a change because I was around the batting cage and Bobby would say, hey, hitting coach, Tom Robson, he needs to fix this. Okay, Skip, got it. Then I'd go in the video room and there's Bobby in the video room with a pitcher, without the pitching coach, moving a pitcher from pitching from one side of the rubber to the other side of the rubber, and the pitching coach wasn't in the room. And so I saw processes that I didn't like. And so what I thought was I was protecting Bobby by not bringing him into it. Because what I didn't want was, people thinking that Bobby cut his coaches and he was, because already, the media at times gave him a hard time. I tried to protect him. And so it fell all on me. I took it. In some ways, it victimized Valentine to where the media sort of felt sympathetic for him. And it changed his relationship with a lot of writers in that way. But it was still the right thing to do. But it really compromised our relationship. It might not have been, it was the right decision. I don't know that I handled it the right way.
Did Bobby Valentine do a book, Dave?
What's that?
Did Bobby Valentine do a book? Has he done a book?
Good question. Haven't read it.
I don't know.
Do you know
I don't
Steve?
know that he's done a book yet. I don't think he's done a book yet. And I'm not looking forward to that book when it does come out. I will say, those books always sound like a good idea until you actually read it and your name's in it, and you look in the index and your name's on like 46 of the 212 pages. It doesn't end up going well for you. But here's the thing: he can write the point. I'll write the counterpoint book.
Exactly.
And so I'd like the last word on it. So I'll wait for his book to come out.
Well, we got to get TSN Publishing on board here. I like that we've just created content, Steve. This is outstanding.
Yeah, controversy, I think, is what you created there, right there. Yeah. I mean, I thought I was coming on to talk about the Derby.
Yeah,
and instead, here I am talking about Bobby V. I mean, who knew?
Bobby V. I love where that's the beauty of this summertime radio on TV. You never know where the conversation is going to go.
At least it didn't turn to Bobby Bonilla, so thank you very much.
Maybe another. If I'm allowed back here, one day we'll find a way to get into Bobby Bonilla.
Terrific.
But I have to ask you about Shohei Ohtani.
Yes.
Because this is someone who non-baseball people are captivated by. Anytime I'm talking sports or I meet somebody new and they know what industry I'm in, this guy comes up constantly. How is this guy going to stay with the Angels, if that is the case? Because it seems to me like anyone with the winning desire that he expresses should want to get the heck out of there as fast as possible.
Yeah, I don't think the Angels have a chance to keep him. I really don't. If they had one, I mean, they've missed their window. I mean, you've got to try to get it done because if he goes to free agency, the Dodgers are getting in, the Mets are getting in, the Cubs are getting in, the Padres are getting in, the Giants are getting in. And there's going to be one more Dodger dollar than Angels dollar. There's going to be one more Steve Cohen dollar, a dollar with his face on it, than there is an Angels dollar. And so if it comes down to money, the Angels lose. And if it comes down to winning, the Angels lose. If it comes down to geography, then they're in a tie with the Dodgers, and they're probably in a tie with the Giants and the Padres. And so I just don't see a formula that he stays an Angel. And so I think that he's going to move on. And at this point, with where they are right now, where they're 7 out of the division, they're 5 out of the wild card, I think it's pretty clear they should be sellers, and I think it'll be malpractice if they don't trade him. I mean, you have to trade him now. I mean, there's no sense taking him to the end and getting a draft pick for him. And here's the thing, even if you want to sign him back, trade him, because you're going to pay him $60 million a year. And in order to do that and pay Mike Trout and pay Anthony Rendon, you're going to have to play a slew of prospects around him on the field that are minimum salary guys. And so you need to trade them to get those guys to play with them if you decide you want to sign them in the future.
Steve, Major League Baseball draft, not as big a deal as the NFL draft or the NBA draft, mostly because the prospects selected don't often become Major League players for quite some time. Blue Jays definitely picked a guy that will not be a Major League player for quite some time, barring the unexpected. Power-hitting shortstop Arjun Nimala was their guy, 17-year-old kid out of Tampa, Florida, with the 20th overall pick. I don't know what you know about him, what you've heard about him, but give us what you got.
Yeah, 17 years old, a lot of room for projection and raw power. But he's a guy that's going to fill out. He's a good all-around player right now. He's got great hands, very good range. He's got pop in his bat, but he's going to fill out his body. But there's a lot of upside there as an offensive and defensive shortstop. Now, I joked this morning that he'll be ready in time to replace Bo Bichette when he leaves for free agency. But I don't know that he's going to be quite.
Steve.
I don't know that he's going to be quite ready for that yet. He's 17 years old, and he's Indian American from India. His family from India. The first player ever drafted in the first round from India, and so just a really special, amazing story, and a very talented young man. And one that, just a great personality, leadership ability, first-class young guy. And so he's going to get his career started. It's going to take him some time to develop and grow. He doesn't have that man body yet. And I don't mean dad bod like dog. I mean man body. But he'll fill out and he'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time.
Okay, so you fired the shot across the bow at Blue Jays fans talking about beloved Bo Bichette leaving in free agency. You got to back that up, Steve. Do you believe that's
teasing.
coming?
I'm teasing, but I mean, they've got him signed for his arbitration years. And I think that they need to sign him and Vladdy, get them both locked up for the long term, build around those guys for the future. And waiting is only costing more.
Yeah.
The price tag's not going down. Once you get them signed to the long-term deal, then, you can always keep an open mind about changing positions. Because once he's signed, he's going to play where you tell him to play. But you might as well sign him while you still are committed to playing him as a shortstop, because 3 years from now, you might be thinking, he's a second baseman. He might still want to play short. And so I think that, time is of the essence. I don't think it's a priority now that they've got, the seasons in rolling and they got him locked up for the arbitration years. There's no urgency, but I do think that he's likely going to lead the American League in hits for the third straight year. He's, an all-star again. He's becoming a superstar personality and talent. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, you don't want to lose him. And you can, and I think that this is a market that should be able to afford to keep him and Vladdy, but they've got to try to find a way to make a deal.
How much do you think maybe the lack of urgency is on the player? This is a totally different generation, right? And in this city specifically, someone of the superstar caliber like Bo Bichette can look at Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner on the Toronto Maple Leafs in a hard salary cap system and see when these guys are at their ceiling, it doesn't really matter what they do in the regular season. They're totally judged in the postseason. Baseball, I've got a real opportunity here. I can continue to increase my stock value, so I'm going to go to the last second. Mm-hmm. How much do you think that is affecting?
Yeah, so I think there probably the lack of urgency from the player's perspective exists in part because, they know they're going to get a payday. I think Bichette had to look at the shortstop market this offseason and think, geez, look at what Turner got. Look at what Bogart's got. Look at what Tatis Jr. got a couple years ago. Look at what Correa got. And so I deserve that and more, maybe. The other thing is you've got sons of big leaguers. So, it's not like they're coming from some place where they need to, they need to take care of family. They need to get a deal. We've seen some organizations with some players that have, needed to get money for their family, and it was the right thing for them personally to make a deal, but the team's got some bargains. We're not talking about that with Guerrero and Bichette. And so, they don't need to rush into it, which is probably some complication to this deal as well.
There you go. Steve Phillips. This was a pleasure. This is my first time on air with you. I've watched you for a long time. It was a real pleasure to chat with you on OverDrive, Steve.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. And who do you got in the Derby tonight?
Oh, man. In the Derby, the home run Derby,
yeah.
I'm going Vlad. I'm going to keep it local.
Too. I'm going Vlad too. Yeah, I'm going Vlad too. I do. I think his experience in this of knowing that he doesn't need to hit the 91 home runs.
Yes.
To be able to pace it a little bit, to be able to save some of that for later. I think this is his year.
Experienced guy. I like that.
All right,
Steve Phillips.
Steve.
Thanks so much. Enjoy the All-Star break.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Taking a look at the FanDuel odds. Pete Alonso, the favorite on FanDuel to win the home run derby, plus 330.
I think the guy you got to watch is Julio Rodriguez, right?
Yes,
because
local
he's
guy,
a home crowd, and he can drill it, man. And plus 500, there's some value there.
You ever envious of people that just have naturally good nicknames, like J-Rod?
J-Rod's pretty good.
Great nickname.
Not bad.
And what do they call you? What's the Dave Feschuk?
Fezzy.
Fez. The men's league hockey guy? He would be Fezzy, I guess.
I've had a few.
Yeah. I'm a Dunner. That's it.
Not the greatest.
No, not the greatest. No. I've had Bernaldo before.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's better.
Bernaldo, but I may have had to invent that myself, which makes it. Yeah.
You gave it to yourself?
I don't know.
Men's league
I
soccer?
can't remember the story anymore.
Okay.
You're listening to
After
OverDrive.
you scored an own goal.
Yeah, that's after I scored an own goal at Co-Ed League 7-a-side down at Cherry Beach. Yeah, that was it. This is OverDrive. Much more coming up. We'll get into some hockey. We'll get chatting with Ian Mendes about the trade that's affected the Ottawa Senators. You're watching OverDrive on TSN 4 and listening on TSN Radio 1050 and the iHeartRadio app. It is that time. It is OverDrive. Halfway through this 3-hour mini marathon, but Hayes Noodles and the O-Dog are away because summer holidays, man. Who knows what they're doing? All I have learned since being here is they're not doing it together.
Yeah.
They're as far away as possible from each other.
Rappler sowing the seeds of discontent with the team, telling us secrets.
You work all the time, as you writers do. You've got 2 of the busy beats, but the seasons overlap.
Yeah.
So is the summer the cram everything in with the family? We're going to Europe. It's got to be at peak season, July and August.
Oh yeah. I mean, like most people shut it down pretty good in the summertime. Obviously, everybody's monitoring, the Matthews, Nylander situations.
Of course.
There's all kinds of business to be done, but you get the sense it's going pretty slowly, and so a lot of the hockey insiders take the day off or the few weeks off. A lot of this is a good time. Now, August is definitely a good time. I think July is a little dicier. There's still going to be plenty of NHL stories between now and the end of July, but August gets pretty slow.
So if I'm trying to get a hold of you in August, I'm not getting you.
Probably not.
But
although, you know what? Nowadays, I wish I was one of those guys that could go off the grid and never be found. But I've always got the phone. I've always got the laptop because you're working on stuff, right? I don't know. I should probably shut it down more often.
Relaxing is good for the soul, man.
Yeah.
You gotta recharge. I'm very happy that our next guest has not gotten to that phase where the phone is unplugged completely. Ian Mendes joins us. Ian Mendes, senior reporter for The Athletic. Ian, it's a pleasure, man. How are you?
Hey guys, doing great. And I understand Dave's pain here of you get into a summer and you guys have Nylander and Matthews and we had DeBrincat and we've been waiting and it happened on a Sunday night in July, which is like suboptimal time, as a writer. But I know the feeling of just when is there going to be some closure?
Do you often feel like sometimes that's because of you, like the universe did that to you, that it landed on a Sunday night? Like, of course, in the middle of this family dinner, this 5-generation family dinner we were hosting. No, this trade happened.
Oh, I know. I like to refer to it as like the law of maximum inconvenience, right? Like what is the thing that can happen that will inconvenience me the most? And absolutely, I am convinced that Steve Yzerman and Pierre Dorion were on the phone. We're like, how can we make this the most inconvenient for the reporters? They're like, let's do this on a Sunday night at 7:45, 8 p.m.
Oh yeah,
and yeah, you guys know how
I know.
What that's like.
I know exactly what that's like, particularly in this last year when Canada Soccer likes to do this Friday 6:47 p.m. drops. Ahead of a 7 p.m. dinner that I've just made a reservation for. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Just to order the apps. I just got to write a story on my phone, really.
Right.
I just got to write a story on my phone. But Ian, obviously, big news. Alex DeBrincat is out the door. Everyone had anticipated that this might happen. He's made it very clear that Detroit is where he wanted to go. And now you see the haul and you see the return that the Senators got, the situation they were in. And what do you think about the move?
Yeah, listen, Ottawa was painted into a corner here. And, when they got Alex DeBrincat about a year ago, almost to the date, the conventional wisdom was, well, Ottawa hit a home run here. Ottawa won this deal. The only thing will be, DeBrincat's contractual situation, how will that play itself out? But at the time, it was like, hey, this is good times in Ottawa. I think they were hoping it would be one good year of DeBrincat. They'd make the playoffs. He'd be convinced that this is the right fit for him, and away they go. Instead, it was almost the opposite. He didn't quite have the season that he wanted. The team didn't make the playoffs, and I just don't think this guy felt like it was calling to him, like this was the right place. So at that point, I think Ottawa was probably in a point where they were going to get a mitigated return, a diluted return, because Alex DeBrincat and his agent really held a lot of the cards here. Even though he was an RFA, he held a lot of the leverage, and he could have just come back and said, look, play out the year. We saw it with Johnny Gaudreau last year. I'm just going to play out the year, and we'll see what happens. But instead, and this might not be a popular assessment, but I don't mind what the player did here. He was upfront and said, look, I'm not going to sign here. It's probably in everyone's best interest to move me. But if you're Pierre Dorion, you're thinking, well, if I'm going to move you, I better find a place where you're willing to go. And so I think it was clear it was Detroit. And the return isn't amazing. It's okay. It's Dominic Kubalik and basically in a first-round pick and a couple of other pieces. And, maybe if he can use that cap flexibility to get something else, maybe we're having a different conversation in a few days. But right now, it feels like a C+ type of return for Ottawa.
So when you look at the way DeBrincat handled this, though, Ian, I mean, what do you make of it? Because as you point out, he could have just said, look, let's let it roll. He could have said nothing and just become a free agent at the end of next season, at which point you would think this guy had a chance with the talent level and the goal scoring he's been able to put up in this league. He could have got an 8-year deal, some, $8 million plus. In the end, he gets what turned out to be a 4-year deal with the Red Wings. Do you think that it went the way he hoped it would go, or could he have done something differently here?
No, I think, look, if you're Alex DeBrincat and you end up in the place, I think Alex DeBrincat, if he got to free agency next July, I think Detroit clearly would have been his destination, right? Like if he could handpick a place, I think he'd want to go home. Maybe he doesn't get the term, but at the same time, he gets some flexibility here. He'll be a UFA again, potentially, kind of when he's turning 29. Maybe he cashes it. Maybe if in his first 3 years in Detroit, he scores like 100 goals or 110 goals, well, he's going to, and the cap number goes up, he's going to offer himself some flexibility. So, I see some people saying, wow, Alex DeBrincat didn't secure the bag, or Alex DeBrincat didn't get, the 8 times 8, but he got pretty much an 8-year deal. And, I'm always a believer, like if I was an agent, I would, on the really good players, I would say do that. Like I always love it. I know in your market, people probably didn't love it, but I always like that term. Like what Matthews did, I'd be telling more players like McDavid's and Matthews and like do the 3, 4, 5-year deals and keep trying to monetize yourself as the cap goes up instead of locking into 7, 8 years. DeBrincat's probably not at that stratosphere, but again, he gets to go home. And I don't know if you can put a price tag. We've seen guys do it. Claude Giroux came home to Ottawa. He wanted to come home. John Tavares wanted to go home. And sometimes when a guy wants to go home, there's really nothing you can do about it. And you just have to, unfortunately, Islanders fans know this. There's nothing you can do about it, and you just hope you get some sort of return for the player.
No, fair point. They got something. Pierre Dorion got something. But what are the expectations for the Sens? Like, I feel like it's playoffs or bust, but is it as simple as that, or is it more complex?
I think it's a little bit more complex. Like, I do think this management team and coaching staff, it's playoffs or bust for them. I don't think it's playoffs or bust for Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Jake Sanderson, and the core. But I do think it is for the management team around them. And I think, we're going into year 7 of the rebuild. Like, they've missed the playoffs 6 straight years. So, for a general manager to keep his job after missing the playoffs in 6 straight years, basically, like, this is unheard of. Like, we have not seen this in the salary cap era. So, this is very rare, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Pierre Dorion to put the right pieces in place to make this a playoff team. What I think is interesting, though, is I think Ottawa is in the same boat as Detroit, which is interesting why they made the DeBrincat trade. But again, if that was the only place Alex was willing to kind of entertain on an extension, well, that's the only place you could send them. That's neither here nor there. But you're competing with Detroit for a playoff spot. And I think you're competing with Buffalo for a playoff spot. And let's be honest here, the Pittsburgh Penguins with a new kind of hockey operations department, they didn't tear it down. They're going in to make the playoffs again. So that's 4 teams that were on the outside looking in saying, I want to be a playoff team next year. So, yes, on the surface, playoffs or bust, I think, makes sense for Ottawa. But if we look at this in reality, I don't know that 4 teams are dropping out of the playoff race in the Eastern Conference and that those 4 aforementioned teams are getting in. So I look at this and say maybe 1 or 2 of them get in, and Ottawa should be one of them. And if they're not, I think there will be consequences here. I think like on the coach, on the general manager, and on some of the ancillary parts to the roster. But the core itself, I think people seem to believe in them. They just need to be surrounded with kind of a supporting cast that pushes them over the hump.
So it was a little less than a month ago, Ian, that we learned that a group led by Michael Andlauer, Toronto businessman, is going to be taking over the Ottawa Senators from an ownership perspective. What is in your opinion, or maybe your observation, how is that going to go? Like, when will we start to see an imprint from the Michael Andlauer group on the operations of the Ottawa Senators?
I mean, my guess is pretty soon. Like, as soon as he gets the keys to take over, I would suspect, and again, that's at some point in August, maybe as late as Labor Day, but at some point, let's say in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, there's going to be the official, hey, Michael Andlauer is the owner of the Ottawa Senators. And in talking to people that know the way that he ran or runs Hamilton and how engaged he has been, even as a stake owner in the Montreal Canadiens, like, this guy's all in. Like this guy's going to move to Ottawa, and he's not going to be a passive owner. He's going to be I'm engaged, and I want to make sure this is on the right track, which is, I think if you're an Ottawa fan, this is what you want, because you want a committed owner who's committed to winning on the ice, and that's the number one priority. I think some of the other ownership groups that were circling around the team, I think some of them absolutely were thinking about this as a Stanley Cup opportunity, but some of them were also looking at this as, wow, this is a really attractive real estate play. And I don't think Michael Andlauer looked at it that way. I think he looked at it through the lens of, there's a great young core, there's a great opportunity to be a majority owner and maybe win a Stanley Cup. So I think, and he's like a real hockey nerd, like a real absolute, like, he knows his stuff. And I think when he gets in there, he's going to make some change. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he makes some additions to hockey operations or the business side within, weeks of taking over and maybe even before the start of the regular season.
If we had this conversation 3 or 4 months ago, talking about the summer, your expectations would be you'd just be consumed with Deadpool and DeBrincat conversation. And now we know that neither of those are the reality. At least DeBrincat is gone. So that's now in the rearview mirror. I am curious, Ian, how someone in a market like Ottawa, how you spend the rest of your summer, my friend. What do you get up to out there in the nation's capital?
Wow, yeah, it's a great question. I mean, it's been a really weird year covering Ottawa because, again, the ownership stuff. Like, they weren't a playoff team, but they were a very newsworthy team, like, into this spring with the ownership stuff. So I think a lot of us who cover the Senators are just kind of like, okay, we're excited to take a big breath, a big pause. I was lucky enough I was able to get away with my wife to Italy during the Stanley Cup final.
There you go.
So while that was going, and in fact, the day after I got back was the day that the team sold. So we talked about the law of maximum inconvenience. I feel like Michael Andlauer was like, you know what, let's wait for Ian to come back from Italy to make this official. But yeah, listen, there'll be kind of some monitoring of stuff, and we got a trip out to the West Coast. I've been able to get down to Toronto a couple times for Blue Jays games, which I absolutely love, that the new look to the ballpark, the new field of the ballpark. So, just a lot of R&R and waiting for Labor Day and this thing to get ramped up again.
So, Dave, I asked that question. It's because I want to know when he's going away and when Tarasenko goes to the Sens.
That's right.
That was exactly my point. I was just trying to make it easier for all of us in the scheduling department.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
As soon as it happens, as soon as I book my trip, that's when Tarasenko is going to be rolling in.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask you, the other move the Senators made this offseason in terms of signing Korpisalo to the 5-year deal at a $4 million AAV. I mean, is there a more unpredictable position in the sport than goaltender? The answer is no. We all know that. And how do you sort of bet on goaltenders now? How do you think they felt they could bet on a goaltender at this point?
Yeah, and I have no issue with the AAV. Like $4 million to me that's the salary you're giving to somebody to say, you know what, we look at you as like our 1A guy, right? Like that's a 45 games, maybe 50 games. That's not a I want you in there 60 games a year. So I have no problem with the AAV. I mean, the term is a little bit long for sure, especially with a guy with injury history. But I mean, there's also something like an Ottawa tax, right? Where to lure people to come to play in a market like this. Probably Winnipeg deals with it, Calgary, Columbus, Buffalo. Some of the smaller markets, you got to pay a little bit more to lure people to your market. So maybe they had to tack on an extra year to Korpisalo, you know? So, but it's so unpredictable. Who would have thought that Sergei Bobrovsky would morph back into the $10 million version of himself in the playoffs? Who would have thought Adin Hill would backstop, Vegas to a Stanley Cup championship? It is so unpredictable. And you know this from Toronto, and I know it from Ottawa. Like Matt Murray is a great example of, there were nights where you thought when he was healthy, if he could just stay healthy, this is a great pickup, and he just couldn't stay healthy. And so it's an unpredictable position. And you look at teams that made the playoffs. I look at Vegas, Carolina, Seattle, like teams that were really good last year that just kind of had like mid goaltending. And I think you can get by with just kind of average goaltending, provided you've got a pretty good system in place to, with your deep forward lines and a decent top four. And I think that's the way to go, rather than rolling up $9-10 million in goaltending. Ottawa's banking on the fact they're paying less than $7 million combined to Korpisalo and Forsberg and hoping it works.
Great points, Ian. This was great. I'm glad you weren't on vacation now and you were able to join us on Overdrive for some hockey talk, man.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Always a pleasure.
And please send those details to producer Keith as to when you're going away again, so we know about Tarasenko. The Sens, okay?
Full itineraries coming in.
That's the crystal ball. Ian Mendes from The Athletic. Thank you very much, my friend. Like talking a little hockey, like finding out what Ian gets up to in the summer, and also knowing, when big moves are going to happen.
That's right.
That seems pretty smart, right? This is Overdrive. FanDuel Overdrive is brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Don't go anywhere. Lots more to come on Overdrive on TSN 4 and TSN 1050. This is Overdrive. My name is Brendan Dunlop. Happy to be alongside Dave Feschuk as we get into all things everything on this MLB All-Star break start to the week. Leaves us with a lot to chew on, wouldn't you say?
A lot to chew on. Very chewy.
Yeah, perfect time then for something to chew on. Brought to you by Boston Pizza this summer. Whether you're in Moose Jaw or Moncton, there's a BP patio near you. Join us for a long lunch or a late night. See you for a pint on the patio soon. So, producer Keith, who I know you are affectionately called the Grappler, but since this is my first ever show with you, I didn't feel like I was in the position to use the beloved nickname.
No, listen, I mean, people, you can use it whenever you want, although it is very strange when, like, even not close friends of mine, but, acquaintances of mine, even after, the 4+ years I've been on this show, like, eventually Keith kind of gets dropped, and I'll hear from them, like, oh, you're the Grappler? Like, yeah. So, no, people are still figuring out. But no, it's free reign. You use it however you please.
I just don't want to be like that guy at the wedding. I can imagine he goes to he goes to a wedding. It's the wife's friends, and they're like, oh, the Grappler's here, and you're like, man, I don't work with you. It's a work nickname.
I haven't gotten quite that, but they're like I live in the Burlington Hamilton area, and there have been a couple times where I'm just pumping gas and someone will yell, Grappler. It's like, thank you.
Love it.
Just what I was looking for.
That's the best, man.
I mean, you can't really call it a work nickname. I mean, it's on national TV.
No, it's a moniker now. I like that. Okay.
You can't run away from it now. I mean, you got to lean into it, man.
But Dave, my issue with that is, I mean, 20 years from now, when I'm 53 years old, do I really still want people referring to me as the Grappler?
I think you do. I think you do.
Even my wife, who, we've been married just over a month now, and she's, taken on the Mrs. Grappler moniker. And I don't really know if she wants that either.
Well, I could see that one. Mrs. Grappler's kind of got a charm to it, though.
Mrs. Grappler. Yeah, that should be the next thing to chew on. Maybe we can do that later in the week. That'd be like your nickname. Do you want it when you're 53 years old?
Well, did she take your actual surname?
She did, yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Well, she's asking for it then.
That's true.
You know?
I guess you can't have one without taking the other as
Right.
well. They're a package deal.
There you go.
You solved it. There you go.
Right.
You solved it.
Anyways, for this week's edition of Something to Chew On, we are asking our listeners who you think has been the Blue Jays MVP through the first half of the season. Obviously, tweeted it out at OverDrive 1050. Kevin Gosman at 44.6%, Bo Bichette 52.7%, and then the always important other coming in at 2.7%.
Who's the other?
Yeah, honestly.
Honestly, I wanted to put someone in brackets. Like maybe it's Jordan Romano.
Yeah, he'd be the
I
other.
mean, near the league lead in saves, but other than that, like it's nobody close.
Don't you think there's just people, especially on this dying social media network, there's just people that just do that to tick the box? They're just like, I'm going to be that one person.
Yeah. Like,
just got to do something different.
Like the people that go to the ballot box and write, the gorilla, right?
Yes.
Or they write an animal's name.
fair enough. No, look, I mean, it's an interesting race, though, between those two, right? Like Gosman, obviously leading the American League in strikeouts. He's been by far their best pitcher. Hasn't been a lock to win. He's only 7-5 in the win-loss column because of the fact that they can't score runs when he's on the mound for some unknown reason. Just kind of a strange anomaly, but he's been as advertised. But then Bo Bichette, I mean, he's been the heart and soul of this team.
Yes.
Leading on track to lead the league in hits for the third straight year, as Steve Phillips was talking. It's an interesting debate.
For me, it's Bo Bichette without a doubt. What boggles my mind is I don't think he's getting enough attention. Nationally, expected. It usually isn't fair with the Blue Jays. But by nationally, I meant by American media.
Yeah.
But in this market, I don't think we're talking about him as much as he deserves.
Interesting.
Bo Bichette and the Blue Jays got a couple days to sit and think on things. This is OverDrive. You're watching on TSN 4 and listening on TSN Radio 1050 and the iHeartRadio app. Stick around. Lots more to come.